are we not to curse here? Like, what the heck is tourism? We're going to spend $1 gazillion to fight other cool places, to try to bring people here, to spend money in restaurants, which is all going somewhere else because that's where the food came from. So the streets are crowded. I just don't get tourism. I don't get why we need to prostitute ourselves. Why don't we just stay here in this beautiful state and enjoy ourselves and stop begging people? Like in your house, you don't beg people to come for dinner. You don't think people coming for dinner makes you money. Like the whole thing to me is completely insane. And it's what the government spends so much money on because then they can show that they, quote, did something. What's your, and we didn't talk about this, so maybe he loves tourism. What do you think about tourism? It's a little risky.
I love to go to the beach.
That's not tourism.
No, it's
Thoreau.
That could be, but you know, and human beings
What do
need
you
to
think
go.
of tourism as an economic development where the state spends a ton of money on attracting other people to the state, while the state next door is spending money on attracting them, and it's a bunch of people just all spending money on nothing.
Right, and it's mostly the people
Is
who
that the tourism commissioner?
have
What's next year's needed president?
I'm probably not as adamant against tourism, but I try not to fly anymore, partly because of my carbon footprint, partly because I think the TSA is a criminal organization. You know, I think they're a part of the national insecurity state. So, you know, so I travel less, and I don't have a passport because there are only 2 places in America where you don't have any rights: airports and borders. So I don't cross the border. You know, I don't have a passport, and since I don't really want to fly, you know, it's all right. If I really need to go to Canada, I can probably find some wilderness that I can cross over. I've hitchhiked with people who were doing that. They find all the logging roads, but that was 40 years ago, before they had all the border surveillance. You know, tourism is problematic in that it's mostly low-paid jobs, and it really does strange things to communities. I mean, you know, they become all about restaurants, and you know, when you're all about restaurants, you have a lot of food waste, and you know, you wonder about that. So, but you know, people should see the world. You know, people need to get out of their own way and get out of their own habits and do some kind of travel at some point, just to see the world differently. And so, you know, can you make it easier for them? Is it something that we should promote a lot? Probably not. You know, we probably do too much of it. But, you know, it's like, what are we going to do as our industrial base collapses? Because our industrial base essentially, you know, collapsed and is never coming back. And we've got robotics. You know, I mean, the only way you could avoid tourism as a way to keep some people employed is to do something like universal basic income, which, you know, we would probably really need anyway, because then we wouldn't be thinking about doing some of the strange things we do to get growth. I mean,
what is universal basic income?
Everybody gets a check every month from the government for enough to get by.
Enough to get by is an interesting question.
Right, it is. It's a very interesting question, and the thing is that comes back to the whole issue of what's economic growth, and do we want it, and is it useful, and should we be chasing it? Because if you never have enough, you're always going to chase more.
But do you know what enough? I'm building a simple house next to my real house, and I'm building it myself, and I'm obsessed with the idea of what is enough and how do we live more simply. And all the ads say, fly to Aspen, you'll get the girl and you'll be happy. Well, it sucks. I don't fit. Someone else is driving. It's a lot of money. It's never fulfilling. So I feel like the marketing, and back on tourism, is taking me personally away from the things that increase my well-being, my health, my satisfaction. So when I say what is enough, we're going to open a Simplicity Center, and we're going to study. Since if you Google simplicity, all we get is Walden. Like, it's 150 years of studying more to become happier, not less. And so that's why I asked that. Does anybody know of any place or any writings that have people studying everything they don't need to understand if they spend less, they could be more free and more happy and more healthy?
Well,
You guys are all looking at me funny. Just here, anyone, is that like, you're like all on that or like not on that?
Well, the whole tiny house movement, all that minimalist stuff, the micro apartments, what are they, like 50, 100, 200? You know, basically it's a place to sleep and eat and stuff like that. If you live in one of those, we had a tiny house show down my way the other day. Wow, you know, you really have to give up everything. It's basically a place to eat and sleep.
I can't wait to give up everything. That's so if you had to give up all your crap that's in the attic and the basement, and all your kids' furniture, and all the stuff you come home to that you have to take care of, and you could do it and be proud of it, because the world was saying, do that, and you're a leader, you're nodding. Like, don't you think you would, like, in a second? Bonfire.
In a heartbeat, absolutely.
I lived in a house that I built myself that was 12 by 12, and I did it for many years, and I loved it. You know, I didn't have to give up anything because I moved there essentially with what I could carry on my back and a few tools, you know, and that's all, you know. I mean, I didn't own it when I got there, so it was like, it wasn't anything. And when I had more stuff, I just built outbuildings. You know, I had a barn that I built out of somebody else's barn, you know, and you know, I could build pole barns for storing lumber and stuff like that.
Well, there was an article in the Times the other day about how seniors, the new economy, that they have to live in RVs and make a living, going from place to place, you know, doing like mowing lawns, because they can't retire.
Right.
So they buy a used RV and they travel around. I mean, my wife and I have an RV, 24-foot. I would say that's a marriage encounter. You can live in a 24-foot box without killing each other for a while. But you really don't, you can't have anything in one of those things. It's really minimal. But that seems to be a lifestyle for a lot of people.
Well, part of it is that we have this great separation that people can't afford to live anymore. I mean, housing is a big economic driver in this country. But we don't build housing for the people who actually need housing. We build housing for the people who can afford housing. And, you know, what was in Boston, the headlines today were 8.5 million loan fund for people to be able to build housing that low-income and working people can afford to live in. And, you know, this issue of simple houses, I mean, you know, most of the people in the world live in a small house. And if we didn't have all this stuff, we could have an economy that didn't destroy forests and didn't catch all the fish in the sea and didn't create the dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that's really what the contrasts are ultimately is, do we want a world where the dead zones keep growing? And do we want a world where those dead zones stop growing and start shrinking? You know, we shrunk the ozone hole, but that's pretty much the only one we've been able to shrink recently. You know, do we want a world where everybody's got an iPhone and pedestrians are crossing streets and getting hit because they're so addicted to their screen? You know, I don't carry a cell phone.
How do you justify, as a planner, we advocate smart growth, cluster, you know,
right,
putting people together in concentrated places and leaving lots of open space. But to me, it's madness. It's, you know, rats in a maze when you put everybody living on top of each other. Form-based zoning is like that, you know, 500 square foot lots and stuff. Right. That's not for me because I wouldn't want to live that close to my neighbors. I mean, the concept is to preserve open space by concentrating development, but by the same token, you also got all this development in one place and you're using up all the resources. It's a trade-off, isn't it?
It's a trade-off, but ultimately, we're going to have to use less stuff on planet Earth. We can't, you know, I mean, the iron mines over the years, the grade of iron has decreased. So you have to dig a bigger hole to get the same amount of iron, and it's more likely in a place where it's harder to work, and, you know, the people who live there are going to get poisoned by you building this iron mine, and you're going to drive them out, and it's going to take more energy to smelt it, it's going to take more energy to transport it, and it's getting harder and harder to find.
Well, the Snowy Range is all mined out. It's all taconite now.
Right. When you say that, someone might say, well, technology will create. So I'm going to have solar and I'll have all the power I need to keep building. And it's almost like philosophical difference of,
I think some of it is...
Just to finish. So we've been here 5 million years, right? Humans on the planet, mostly living in something this big. And even in the last 30 years, the size of the American household doubled from 1,000 to 2,500. But before 100 years from now, all the time we've been on the planet, we had sort of nothing. We had nothing to lose. So you make a new arrow, you make a new bow. And I think on our agenda is to talk about the press and television and consumerism. But the anchor is, if you measure GDP, if you measure the stock market, we equate that to taking care of people, and it's not. And if you measure well-being and the Happy Planet Index, we lose every year. And Cuba and Denmark win. Part Danish and a little bit socialist. That's where we took our vacations as kids. And my kids keep wanting to know, how come Miriam in Denmark is so happy all the time? I'm like, well, she has a place to live. She had a baby, the doctor came to her. Here's a stroller. I'll be back in a week. They've learned that by taking care of people, it costs them less. And then she has all the education she can handle and all the health care she can handle, a place to live. So we believe that all the measures that worked for a while in the 50s and the 60s and 70s by coincidence no longer work, particularly for poverty. And the rest of us are still chasing bigger and better, but it doesn't even work for us. Like, I'm class of 82 out of college, and by luck, some of the people I knew are extremely wealthy. You know, I won't be happy till I'm rich and miserable. What's that song? Like, they're not any happier. It's a nightmare having all those houses and all those airplanes and all that stuff. So every study about wealth is, if you need enough money to be free, and after that it goes, if you have less than that, you're unhappy, and if you have more than that, you're unhappy. This is relatively proven. So I just think the
Goldilocks
discussion,
and the Three Bears.
you can discuss it from the world isn't able to support this anymore, but then a hardcore American male is going to say, of course we can do that, don't worry, I'll figure out a way. Or you can discuss it from an angle of, it doesn't make anybody happy, it doesn't work. We have, so everyone on the planet, what's the average household income if you did it evenly? It's like $100,000.
The
Or
average
150
household
for America.
is,
We have enough money to go around, we just don't share it the right way. So tell us a little bit about why we as humans enable a system to continue that's so bad for us and our planet. And that'll lead to what possibly could be some things we might change that would enable us to make some better decisions.
one of the things about human beings as historical beings and evolutionary beings is they tend to have dominance hierarchies, you know, and they're enforced violently. And that violent dominance hierarchy skews an awful lot. And you know, as you know, when we didn't have anything more than sticks and bows and arrows, you know, you couldn't do much with that. You know, once we started building cities and agriculture, there was a lot you could accumulate. You know, somebody was going to control the grain store for the winter if they could get enough people to do it with them. And so our dominance hierarchies just, you know, continue to expand, and that's really the issue. Is right now we have so much inequality in our economy that it's making it almost impossible for it to work. And one of the quotes I wrote down was, you can have oligarchy or you can have democracy, but you can't have both at the same time. And so that, you know, and so that accumulation of stuff, that accumulation of power, that's really, you know, what happens. And that is why we keep doing more stuff and why we need bigger weapons. And, you know, we need to give up all of that kind of stuff because it's clearly not working for us.